Good morning to everybody, and welcome to this session that is devoted to the presentation and discussion about the new volumes that have been published recently this year or last year in community psychology. I'm Bruno Dan. I'm the chair of this session. This is a round table, in fact. So I will make a brief presentation of this volume, of each of this volume, and then raise a couple of questions to the participant to this round table. The participants are Alba Zambrano will join us in a minute from Chile. Caroline Kagan from Manchester University, who is connected with us from Manchester. Jackie Akust from the Rhodes University, South Africa. Anna Zoli from the University of Brighton, UK. Elena Marta from the University of Cattolica in Milano, Italy. And plus Wolfgang Stark from Duisburg-Essen University in Germany. Okay. This one. No, mica funziona. Non mi funziona questo. Eccola, Alba, please. Chiamo un attimo. Non funziona questo.
Lì non c'è nessuno, Bruna.
No, c'è il... Ah, eccolo. Sì, sì, adesso l'hai fatto girare tu? Ah, ecco. No, però questo non funziona, questo qui. Okay, now this is the aim of the round table, to present initially 4, now 5 handbooks in community psychology published recently that address some topics, some issues that are at the core of the discipline of the community psychology in a diverse, different context. No. So, next one. No, devo stare più vicino io al microfono. Ah, devo stare... fai tu? Va bene, grazie. Va bene, un po' di problemi tecnici. Ok, the next. Ah, vai perché è presentazione. Ecco, so the first one that we present is the Ruthless International Handbook of Community Psychology, Facing Global Crisis with Hope. This is a volume that we published this year, 24 chapters, and is organized in different parts, as you can see. And the idea of this handbook has been to collect some chapters all around the world as authors, from Chile to South Africa to Italy to UK and many others, and organized in 5 parts with this particular organization that is some chapter devoted to the community psychology through a critical lens, so it's a different lens through which it's possible to look at the community, at the contribution of community psychology. So a critical lens, then a practical lens, an ecological lens, and finally a reflective lens. So they are along this chapter, this organization, and the first chapter is as an introduction is facing the global crisis, and then the final chapter is with the lens of hope, so is a message of hope. Okay, then the second one is an Italian handbook that is composed by 2 volumes. The first volume is devoted to the perspective and the key elements. In particular, there are some chapters on historical and theoretical framework, and then the presentation of the main concept of the community psychology, that is empowerment, sense of community, participation, resilience, well-being, prevention, social network and support, trust and hope. The second volume is focused on methodology, research and intervention. So the first two are design and evaluation, and then the PAR, the participatory action research, and then the following chapters on the different field of intervention, that is multiculturality, addiction, violence, collective emergencies, housing, sustainable communities, and competencies. Okay. The third volume is a volume that is just published. Is Community Psychology, South African Praxis. And it's organized in 25 chapters, in three sections, not more, because another one, okay, this is the final. It is 4 sections. The first is on conceptual and theoretical approaches, with particular attention, of course, to the African-centered community psychology and the problem of the decolonizing community psychology. The second section is on research strategies, the classical, in a sense, the traditional research strategies, but this with always this attention to the South African context. Then the community intervention, mental health, prevention, promotion, empowerment, well-being, the peer support groups, and the community mobilization and social change. And then the section 4, they are taking the community issue, the challenges that comes from the community issues, the HIV, the substance abuse, violence and crime, gender-based violence, masculinities, and this interesting new South African men, poverty, unemployment, homeless, racism and xenophobia in South Africa, community trauma, child and adolescent mental health, and the elderly, older people in the community. So this is really a particular handbook linked to the specificity of the South African context. Then the Palgrave Handbook of Innovative Community and Clinical Psychologists, plural, at plural, that is really just published, and is a very heavy handbook in 32 chapters, and is organized in 4 parts. One is devoted to clinical psychology and political activism. The second part on working in radical and disruptive spaces. The part 3 is on transformative change of work, and the part 4 in creativity and social change. So as you can see, it's a different way of organizing the issue. So it's with the focus on community and clinical psychology. Okay. Then we have the really last one. This is a handbook in German. Handbuch Gemeinde Psychologie, community psychology in Germany, and is organized in 2 frames: historical developments and the current references, then foundation and guiding concept, intervention and strategies for action, the field of action, and the research perspective. This is very heavy book because it's about 1,000 pages, something that, well, okay. So the first round of questions that I would like to, possiamo lasciarla qui adesso. The first round of question that now I will raise to the participant to this round table is, what are the main innovative issues of your volume? So Now I have to take the time, so so we can say about 5-7 minutes each in order to answer to this question. Possiamo cominciare da te? You will speak in Spanish.
Buen día. Voy a hablar en español. Mi inglés no es suficientemente bueno. Yo quisiera hablar entonces del primer libro, que es una obra colectiva que intentó integrar esfuerzos de autores de distintos continentes. Creo que el gran mérito que tiene esta obra es haber concertado a autores de lugares muy diversos en un periodo muy crítico como lo es la pandemia. Comenzamos muy temprano en la pandemia y la edición ocurrió durante este proceso. Creo que los autores comparten desde las distintas latitudes una visión crítica al tiempo que propositiva de crisis tan diversas como crisis ambiental, crisis a propósito de los contextos de pobreza, la degradación de entornos de vida, pueblos originarios no siendo respetados en sus derechos fundamentales. Distintas crisis que miradas con lentes de distintas perspectivas teóricas, todas ellas con una visión, por supuesto, crítica de la realidad, lo que intentan es plantear que la labor de las y los psicólogos en los distintos espacios de su quehacer corresponden a una persona que acompaña distintos procesos desde el activismo, desde la investigación, desde la formación. Y en todos estos espacios, la idea es poder acompañar a aquellos grupos que están en una posición más baja, sin voz, otorgando voz para poder entonces expresar sus propias posiciones. Algunos de los capítulos también pasan revista a crisis más específicas. En particular quisiera referirme al caso chileno, en donde evaluamos también cuáles serían los retos que tiene la psicología comunitaria en un país que podríamos señalar es el máximo exponente del modelo de libre mercado y cómo estos 3 últimos años ha sido protagonista de diversos movimientos sociales con una fuerza acumulada muy importante, pero también cómo la estructura social que está, ¿no es cierto?, reforzada, apoyada, facilitada por grupos de poder, ha logrado mantener un alcance limitado de estos movimientos sociales. Entonces, como una explosión social con una envergadura muy amplia que llega a ocupar las noticias internacionales, genera un proceso democrático como generar una nueva Carta Magna posterior a la dictadura, pero nuevamente, cómo las fuerzas todopoderosas de los grupos de élite vuelven a colocar importantes restricciones. Allí la psicología comunitaria tiene necesariamente que utilizar todos sus recursos creativos para facilitar procesos participativos, fortalecer la efectividad de los movimientos sociales y también generar interlocuciones con grupos que pueden tomar decisiones. Lo dejaría hasta allí. Creo que lo valioso de esta obra es la heterogeneidad de los lugares, pero también la heterogeneidad de las voces de las y los psicólogos comunitarios.
Okay, thank you, Alba. Caroline, can you hear me? would you like to add something? Caroline?
No.
No. No. Okay, so we can go with the Elena Marta.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bruna. Hearing Alba, I was thinking that I don't know if it's the time we are living, but also our 2 volumes are the results of a group of community psychologists that work together in order to show to the other that community psychology is not only discipline, we don't only teach or we don't only work as professional, considering the construct and the methodology of community psychology, but we also try to construct a community of psychologists that work with these ideals, methodology, and constructs. I think that in this moment, especially in Italian universities, not so usual, and so it's really important, I think, for us. What is the novelty of these manuals, of these values? I think that the innovative ideas at the base of these values perhaps is not only in the contents, but in the way in which we decided to construct these volumes, because we ask to the authors, it's really a huge group of authors, because we have more than 50 authors in these books. We ask to share with us an idea, editorial project in which we consider 3 assumptions, and we try to make them concrete, not only theoretical assumptions. The first one is that community psychology is not only a discipline, but is an approach that we can use in different settings, that we can propose to different colleagues also from other disciplines, obviously making evident the specificity of psychology, but in a dialogue with the other disciplines, and in the empowerment of, in a reciprocal empowerment of the contribution of psychology to the others, but also to the other discipline in psychology community, considering that if you want to try to work to understand the complex phenomenon of this age, of this time, we need to work with other colleagues and maintain our own specificity. The second assumption is that we ask to the authors to make clear what means when we speak about relationship and processes in a context, because sometimes, I mean, myself, but I think the authors, there is Terry here, the editors of the book, I have the idea that community psychology is too much a theoretical reflection, but it's difficult to transform in a concrete action, and make the colleagues that are outside our field to really understand when we use empowerment, what does it mean, why empowerment used by a community psychologist is different by the empowerment used by different colleagues that perhaps have another idea of these constraints, and also the methodology. What does it mean to do a really participative community research action, and not only put together some techniques or methodology that sound as a community psychology methodology, but they are not. And finally, we ask to the author to make clear what does it mean to produce transformation and to promote transformation processes, not adaptive processes, because the idea is that if I work with relationship, if I try to accompany processes to be a kind of support to the community in order to promote their development, we need to make clear the transformation processes and the transformation action and the results of transformation. If it's not in this way, we are not community psychology. I mean, it's a very strong affirmation, but we are similar to the other psychology. So the idea was to make clear that we have some clear assumptions, and that this is not only theoretical resources, but it's a practical and concrete. And only two other things. I think that another aspect of this book is that in this book are putting together the different roots of community psychology. So the Latin American root, specifically liberation psychology, the North American root, and also the European one. And we try not to put them near, but to put them together, to give a lens in order to read the phenomenon and to give the methodology for work, and also to put together different perspectives. So the psychosocial perspective, the clinical perspective, and the cultural semiotic perspective. Because I said before, this complex time needs to have this different perspective. So it's not an ensemble of chapters, but it's really a collective efforts to put together the differences of the Italian universities, and not only university, but also professional in considering community psychology, but with a common, a shared project, a shared idea of what that means to teach community psychology, to do community psychology, and to make visible community psychology. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to Jackie. Present this one, the South African praxis.
Hello, everybody. I first of all want to give credit to the first editor, Marietta Visser. She's here. And Marietta, just show your hand. There we go. Marietta has made an enormous contribution to writing books in South African community psychology, because she, prior to this, had two former editions that were used often for undergraduate teaching. And so Marietta and I had a chat in Santiago in Chile in 2019, where we floated some of the ideas that have come to fruition in this book. So the ICCP also has a role to play. But I just, in particular, South African community psychology draws from a very progressive history of being in opposition to the mainstream psychology in the 1980s. And then in the post-apartheid era, much of that thinking in psychology has been mainstreamed into psychological departments. So we really, in this book, have celebrated that. Ronelle Carolison is also here. She's a critical psychologist. And then Nyambeni Matamela, unfortunately, couldn't come because she is teaching at the moment. But we have a very strong emphasis on teaching community psychology because of the openness of academic psychology departments to community psychology. And so in planning the book, Marietta went through the past editions and said, no, most of the authors have retired or moved on. So we need something new. And so in our planning, we decided to do a survey of all the departments of psychology in the country. I think there are 27 or 28. And we asked them what they needed in a book. And so many of the contents that we have here are in response to what people wanted. And Bruno, if you don't mind just flicking it one on, just to get the fourth section. Just one more slide, one more click. Forward. Sorry. There we are.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. So the book itself is fully new in comparison to the earlier traditions. And it is aimed at undergraduate students, so it is written in a relatively straightforward style, because the majority of our students are studying in their second language rather than home language. And we have over 30 authors from across the country, authors and co-authors, and the majority of the people writing the book are new to writing texts in community psychology, and they represent 10 of the 28 different departments. So we really have gone for wide coverage and diversity. And we invited people to write upon topics where they have research expertise. So we really were lucky to be able to recruit experts to write the particular sections from a South African perspective. So for example, Kopano Rateli is a specialist in thinking about African psychology and decolonizing psychology. And so he is one of the authors. Malosi Langa has real specialism in violence and reconciliation. And so he's written about that. And so these topics are topics, the case studies are very specifically South African case studies. And I know from having gone back to South Africa from the UK in 2015, I struggled to find examples of case studies that we could use in teaching. And so we've really tried to remedy that in this book. So it is peppered, every chapter has case studies about these particular challenges that our post-apartheid South Africa faces. So it emphasizes diversities, it is research-led, it covers both the theories that my colleagues have spoken about and community interventions. And really the hope, and I think hope is one of the things that is emerging to me through as one of the themes in these different texts. We're hoping to encourage meaningful community engagement towards social change. And although the book itself, if you look at particularly the section 4, challenging community issues, these are the issues that we really have to tackle in South Africa, but I think in many places, these are the issues that are central. So although it might have a South African lens, I think that there are aspects that would be of interest to a broader audience as well. So thank you, Bruna.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to you, Jackie. And now Anna Zoli with the Palgrove Handbook Innovative Community and Clinical Psychologists. Please.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, well, what's innovative about it? Well, innovative is in the title. I'm not sure it's innovative to start with, but yeah, definitely, again, starting from the title, as Bruna mentioned before, there is clinical in the title together with community, although the priority is given to community, and clinical, as I say in a second, is not the traditional clinical psychology we can think of. But the other hint is that we use psychology, so in a plural sense, that's what Bruna was mentioning, because there are not only different theories in psychology, and psychology is all but a homogeneous field, it's very heterogeneous, but there are also very different ways of doing community psychology. So that's why we use the plural, and hopefully in this book, what is innovative is that we try really to get into details of how things are done out there. So there is a lot of examples of working in different settings with different type of service users and people and marginalized groups. And so I think, well, as a student, as I was until yesterday, basically, one thing that we find difficult in books, in textbooks, is to understand what is really going on there. Okay, we have amazing theories and we grasp the principles and values of community psychology, but how is it done when you get down to the real world, working with marginalized, oppressed people and people in distress? Another perhaps innovative feature is the structure. So we didn't go with the more classical, I don't know, theory plus examples, but we rather divided it into 4 parts. That still echo, I think, very important features of praxis and doing psychology in the way we understand it in community psychology. So to start with, yeah, we paired clinical psychology with political activism, which might horrify some clinical psychologists, but definitely is an attempt to show how clinical psychology in the first place cannot be done in a historical and decontextualized way, but clinical psychology is always political, and definitely it can be used in a very critical way to enhance political activism, which has nothing to do with obviously leaving behind the principle of good clinical psychology praxis, but it's how it can serve a more liberatory purpose, hopefully. Then we have the role of spaces, definitely radical and disruptive spaces. We have, for example, a chapter showing informal therapeutic practices in a queer community pub. So, for example, how LGBTI community mental health can be supported and boosted by peers with some form of therapeutical outcome, but definitely not in the orthodox way of doing the one-to-one therapy. Or another one is the support, online support. So the role of cyberspaces for Muslim women of British Pakistani background, and how, for example, physical spaces that wouldn't be accessible, especially to women of certain religion or ethnic background, can be accessible online. So the role of virtual spaces to support mental health. Transformative change work, definitely the emphasis is on the transformative role of social change. So as Elena Marta was saying, for example, not just adaptive change, but something that can be a bit more radical and hopefully disrupt and overturn the power relationship. That's always very ambitious. But we have some example of chapters of supporting health and mental health of Roma people in Spain, for example, so displaced people, and or trauma recovery at the South African State Care Center. So something that hopefully is deeply affecting the lives of the service users. And to finish with creativity and social change, creativity is another aspect that I think is very important and brought to the foreground in this book. The role of creativity is actually boosted also by another feature of the book, which is we included a lot of pictures and drawings. So drawings and pictures taken and produced by the participants, the service users. So it's not, again, a standard classical academic book, in that even some book chapters are not written by academics, or not entirely, although we want to obviously to have a solid background in terms of references. But some of them are written by the service users themselves with the facilitation of the academics that, for example, facilitated the project. And and we also have some author statements, for example, before the chapter, that show a bit how the authors themselves, in a very informal way, understand their doing of community psychologies. And I'll finish by saying that, for example, another very creative example is a book chapter which shows older adults as co-investigators and co-creators. So it's, for example, a very interesting project where the elders have been considered at the same level in terms of power asymmetries, and so trying to bridge in the power asymmetries as of the facilitators. And they learned to use technology and suggested ways, for example, of using technology for their own benefit.
Okay,
I think
thank
that's
you. Thank you, Anna. Very interesting. So now to Wolfgang. Wolfgang start for the German handbook.
And I have to say hello, everybody. I have to say that, first of all, I'm not part of the editor group, so I'm on behalf of the editor group here, and they asked me, could you try to present the book, which is not published yet, so it's going to be published. So that's why you don't have leaflets and these kind of things. So that's pretty new. And thank you, Bruna, that you put me in on a very short notice, because I didn't know that the book is going to be published since a couple of weeks. So it's pretty new, and it has a long history, because the book, the plans for the book started in 2017, I think. So it's a long history, and it has to do with the situation of community psychology in Germany, because community psychology in Germany is has been fading away from the universities. So it's the many university professorships or departments or programs in community psychology were kind of changed when people retired. So that's a story which is in many countries. And so they decided to switch it to cognitive psychology or whatever. So that is one reason why this book may be not really innovative, because it's kind of a sign we are still there as community psychologists, because there are community psychologists, many in Germany, but they're kind of spread in very different areas of their professional life. And so, and that explains why it took us 5 years to build up the whole thing, because the book is kind of, in that term, it's innovative, because about half of the people who are writing in the book are practitioners who usually don't write too much. So it's not an academic book. There are academics, and the different frames or chapters we are using. Altogether, there are 44 chapters and I guess more than 60 authors. We start very traditional with historical developments and current references, but maybe I highlight some of the specialities the book can give maybe to the international discussion as well. And we started a debate about whether we should translate some of the chapters, selected chapters, and maybe we can talk about that later on, how to use it in the international community. One specialty of historical developments is that the role of narratives is pretty important in German community psychology. And we have a narrative project today and tomorrow here as well, collecting stories, community stories. The other specialty maybe is that in Germany, we have a very large and still growing movement of self-help groups. So self-help and mutual help groups. And that's pretty important as one of the kind of pillars of community psychology praxis in Germany. One of the other pillars is a long tradition of working with people who have experience with psychiatry. And so it's kind of a identity building or identity rebuilding work, what people do with people who suffered in psychiatric hospitals and other things. The other thing which may be special, as I mentioned, The biggest parts are intervention strategies and field of action. So that's where the practitioners are writing. And maybe some specialties to highlight is that an important field of action for community psychology is migration and displacement. So that's one thing where many people are working. The other one is psychiatric experience. I mentioned that already. Another specialty maybe is sexual sexual harassment in churches. So that's a big scandal, and has been and still is a big scandal in the last, let's say, 5 or 8 years, that and not only in Germany, but also in Austria, many Catholic churches, they found out that there has been regular sexual harassment by priests. And that's a big issue right now. And that causes a lot of research projects and professional services and these kind of things. Maybe 2 other things which may be special and may be interesting for international debates and discussion is community psychology within psychotherapy. So community psychology as an approach to its psychotherapy or to its supervision, professional supervision. And that's kind of a specialty which has been developed. And the other thing is the work in hospitals, especially psycho-oncology. So working with people with cancer on a community psychology basis. So that's very much connected with this mutual health.
With peoples and with people and with the community. And in the second volume, there is also the first part in which we have participatory action research, and also how to design a project, evaluate project that is not so common, at least in the Italian manual. So it's really practical. And the second volume closes with some indication about the competencies of the community psychologist, making together all the ideas in the 2 volumes, but also make the young students and also the practitioner aware of that, of what does it mean to be a community psychology, to use the methodology, our role in the society, in the community, academical community, of practitioner community. And I close with the sentence that I used in the previous round. What does it mean to transform, to help community to transform the situation, especially for community that are in a vulnerable situation or marginalized community? So why should they read the volume? Because it's a kind of compagno di viaggio, companion of journey, that they can study, can use for the exam, can use for the everyday work if they are practitioner, and they can have in their bags and check if they need. Thank you.
It is particularly addressed to students.
To students, but not only to students, also to practitioners, because there are a lot of practitioners in Italy that have some idea about community psychology, but they don't really know what does means to be a community, to have a community approach, and also sometimes how to use the instruments. Sometimes you have people that use some instruments that are in community psychology or are developed from community psychology. The photo voice or the multiple analysis that Donata developed, or the profiles of the social recognition. but without the awareness of the deep possibilities that these instruments give you in order to change the situation and to make people to work together, and so use the participatory action research as
to be more aware. And they are in Italian, and so there is a problem of translation of some of these chapters also in English in order to make available for everybody.
At this moment, the volumes are in Italian, but I don't know. We have some ideas or dream.
Or a stimulus for other people to learn Italian.
Yes, or for us to translate the volumes
Okay,
in English.
and to Jackie, why someone outside South Africa should read your volume?
So one of the real innovative features of our volume is that it is much more African-centered. So that might sound as if I'm contradicting what you're saying, but I think it's helpful to see how to view psychology globally from different perspectives, not only dominated by the only 11% of people who live in the developed world. So Kopano Ratelli writes in our book that African psychology speaks to a broad category of the body of knowledge and practices that of what psychologists in or in relation to Africa do. So it's very focused on what psychologists do in their practice. And Kopano continues, it is only when African psychology is epistemologically oriented, formulated and practiced for Africa and Africans that we can think of it as African-centered. So I think it really brings a critical lens to psychology in a way that could be very helpful to people. I think the other aspects of the book are that it is evidence-based. So although it clearly is written for an academic student audience and their lecturers, certainly it's a collection of pulling together broadly the evidence in all of those different topic areas for evidence-based interventions. And I think that's valuable. So although it is specifically targeted at a South African audience, the conceptual and research chapters are more generic. And so how, for example, has participatory action research been applied in South Africa? Yes. And also, what are the dominant paradigms? Is it driven by a mental health approach to psychology? Are there examples, for example, of more transformative advocacy roles and activism from psychology in South Africa? And certainly there are limitations to that, but nevertheless, thinking about those sorts of issues. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that it is written mainly for people who have English as second language. So I think it will make it more accessible in many ways than the more academic texts. And the writing is progressive, tackling these epistemic issues. And then a last thing is that it's available as an ebook on Amazon. What you need to do is to put in South African community psychology, South African praxis. I think it's $22, which I think is a pretty good price for a textbook. So that might also make it appealing. But yeah, so over to the others, Bruno. Thank you.
You can say that you can send the link.
Yes, I could certainly send links to people, but if you just go into Amazon and put in community psychology, South African praxis, you'll find it.
Just one. Okay, thank you. So, Alba Zambrano.
Bueno, les invito a leer nuestro volumen porque es un aporte desde distintas miradas posicionadas en distintos lugares del mundo respecto de una visión de las crisis que llama a abordarlas con esperanza, sin ingenuidad, pero con esperanza. Pasa revista en un análisis más detallado a diversas crisis económicas, energéticas, calentamiento global, exclusión, conflictos, etc. Pero el texto va dejando claro que hay una interdependencia en estas distintas crisis. Las crisis hoy día tienen un carácter sistémico, no son fáciles, por tanto, ni de predecir ni de abordar. Pero eso también llama a la necesidad de escalar su abordaje. Desde las distintas perspectivas y experiencias, porque el volumen hace desarrollos más bien teóricos, analíticos, pero también recupera prácticas concretas de corte local para abordar estas distintas crisis. Lo que nos va señalando es, si bien abordar focalmente y en la escala local, es necesario también tener presente que estas crisis interseccionan para ciertos grupos, como lo son las mujeres, las niñas, los grupos indígenas, por ejemplo. Y por tanto, esto significa, desde el abordaje de la psicología comunitaria, tener una aproximación compleja, multinivel, pero al mismo tiempo orientada a la praxis, es decir, actuar focalmente, generar procesos de apoyo y acompañamiento a las comunidades, generar procesos informativos, pero también ganar espacios en el plano político, ¿no? Es un texto que también invita a mirar la praxis desde una perspectiva crítica, ecológica, reflectante, ¿no? Invita también a que las y los psicólogos hagamos explícitos los valores y principios que necesariamente, ¿no es cierto?, se transforman en una alternativa precisamente a lo que son los valores que sustentan las crisis, ¿no? Llama a la solidaridad, llama a la transformación social, llama a la cohesión social, empleando entonces los distintos recursos que tiene la psicología comunitaria. Pero también el volumen llama a tener precaución, porque muchas veces las y los psicólogos en este apasionamiento por enfrentar estas adversidades y estas crisis de la realidad, creemos que podemos fácilmente o mágicamente cambiar la realidad. Entonces tenemos que tener humildad para no exagerar el impacto que podemos tener en esa realidad, tener clara nuestra praxis y una mirada vigilante sobre esa praxis, y fundamentalmente ser ingenieros de puentes, construyendo vínculos, colaboraciones y acciones con otros. Yo diría, eso es una mirada muy panorámica desde distintas posiciones, ofreciendo, yo diría, una mirada muy actualizada, descarnada sobre las crisis, pero también llamando a la mirada reflexiva sobre la interdependencia de estas crisis.
Thank you, Alba. And now, Wolfgang, to you. Why should we read a book in German?
Why should we? You shouldn't read a book in German. So that's for sure. But I think each example of handbooks has always two functions. One function is it's a reassurance for the authors. This are we, and for the field. This is how we think. This is what we do. And so handbooks in this respect don't need readers because it's for the authors. That's why they read. That's why they write it. Provocative. On the other hand, of course, there will be readers if students get an assignment for different chapters. Please read this. They will read it. But beyond that, to be honest, I haven't seen any handbook in the world in academic fields which has been written, which has been read by many people. So it's my question is, how could we kind of dynamize these type of things? I think it's really valuable. There are valuable parts in each of our handbooks. And what could we do in order to start a debate, exchange? So the African perspective is extremely important. The South African American perspective is even more important because it has a long tradition of critical approaches. The different approaches you were saying are very interesting. And how could we bring that into a international debate? So that's my question, which I don't have an answer for right now, but maybe we can take it with us and have it. And we are thinking, like what I said, we are thinking to maybe to translate some of the chapters in order to contribute to an international debate. And what format would it be? I don't know. I don't think it would be another handbook. But yeah, that's right. But maybe it's always contradictory to the business ideas of the publishers if we put out different chapters and put it in an open source thing. So, but yeah, so that's another provocative thing. But maybe we should break some rules in order to be more innovative as well.
Yeah, yes, Anna. Then
Last but not least, as we say. Yeah, well, first of all, I forgot to say before, because I was more concerned with the book rather than who edited it, that this book is actually the outcome of a very hard work of two of my colleagues, Carl Walker and Sally Zlotowicz, from whom I learned a lot. And it was actually a pleasure to work with them. And yeah, they're actually the first and second editors. So it's very important for me to acknowledge that. And yeah, so why should anyone read it at all? Well, hopefully, as I said, is something different a bit on the panorama of textbooks. And also the authors are not the usual authors. Probably most of the names are not known at all. That's because what we valued was the first draft that we received of the book chapter, so the content rather than who wrote it, as long as it had enough details of the practice and praxis, and obviously some solid theoretical framework as well. So it does contain references, there is some theory, but that's very much embedded in the examples. Examples that we tried as much as we could to be international and not necessarily white Western centric. Although, yeah, there are obviously a lot of contribution from the global North and the UK. But luckily there are then other textbooks that can work at the same place. So yes, as I said, it's different, hopefully different voices from practitioners themselves. Some chapters written as a collective of psychologists, collective of workers with different roles and different experience and background. So hopefully it's engaging and inspiring for a varied audience as well. Students might find some inspiration and ideas for their own project, colleagues for maybe tweaking some projects they're already working on, inspiration for applying and bidding for new projects, practitioners, why not embedding even in the most clinical traditional practice some ideas or some awareness of structural social inequalities. And that's true not only for psychologists, but any type of practitioners and citizens as well, because some examples, especially those drawn from the global economic crisis and austerity, involve citizens, and this actually in Greece, for example, for those who come from Europe, know about how much Greece has been plagued by the whole austerity, and now not only Greece. So for sure there is some level of accessibility, hopefully, and interest for even the lay citizen that is not interested or not familiar with community psychology or psychology as a whole, but still might find something interesting in here. And the last point I would like to say is also not just engaging and inspiring, assuming it's all good, but hopefully there is something to be challenged as well. So something that can be taken as a challenge for the future to be maybe modified, overturned, and revolutionized as well.
So really, we are provoked to read the book. And well, we have still 10 minutes. So we are very respect of the time. And well, I ask if there are someone from also from online that who are willing to say something, but there's something. If you want to speak, you can, I think that you can. Sì. C'è qualcuno che è collegato che vuol parlare?
Well, I'll speak, if that's okay, Bruna.
Yes.
I think it's clear from the presentations that there's a shift.
Caroline, yeah, Caroline Kagan.
Yeah.
Please.
That there's a shift in the content and orientation of these textbooks, that they are more overtly political. They're not shying away from addressing issues of power. They're more overtly collaborative, involving new people and new voices, not just in the academy, but from the community as well. But they are hamstrung by commercial publishing imperatives. And I suppose kind of what Wolfgang was saying there about open source possibilities. There are more now open source, not only textbooks, and there's a link in the chat to some open source textbooks, but to open source journal publishing, but blogs and websites and so on of practitioners and of projects are increasingly important. And I think it's really going to be essential that we move more to open source publishing. And in community psychology, we need to try and really resist the commercial requirements of academic publishers. So in our handbook, for example, which is the one that Alba's been talking about, we wanted to be able to put chapters in different languages, and they wouldn't allow us to do that. The best we could achieve was to have abstracts in both Spanish and in English in the book itself, not just on the website. But the reason why they won't do it is because their marketing departments have very constrained views of how to market books, and they don't market to books in different countries at the same time in the same way. So I think that the political content of these books needs to now be reflected in how we actually publish books.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Caroline. Anna Maria, hai alzato la mano?
Yeah, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Do you hear me? Yeah.
Sì, sì. Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, I really...
No, ti sei bloccata subito, Anna Maria, non ti sentiamo più.
She's frozen.
Non funziona più. Come? Ah. Anna Maria, c'è un problema di connessione con te perché sei rimasta bloccata. Prova a riprendere la connessione. No. No, non ti sentiamo più. Cosa è successo? È scomparsa. Adesso vediamo se rientra. Ok. We are waiting if Anna Maria De Rosa is trying to connect with us. There are someone other who want to say something. Even among you, if you have some question each other, because it's a round table anyway. So we have the idea to have this a more international handbook. Oh, okay,
No.
see, bye.
Oh, very sorry, I'm in a precarious condition. So if the communication fall down again, don't worry. But I just want complete that the way one of the reasons to read the book out of our cultural context. Although community psychology as well, I think social psychology, but also any discipline needed to be contextualized in the culture investigated and studied and where it is produced. But there is, for example, a way to act the decolonization of South Africa culture if we better understand also from their own perspective how knowledge is built, how practice are driven by their own knowledge. Otherwise, we risk also to promote, and for me, Africa is one of the really mysterious continent because I move all over the world, but just a few times in Africa, so I don't pretend to have any knowledge. But for example, just inviting colleagues from South Africa in our symposium on immigration, we discover a reverse stereotype about Africa as only sending a country for immigrant from the European perspective, whilst there is a great immigration also in other countries, and it was really for myself itself, for my colleague from Canada, Argentina, Brazil, who participate to our symposium, a way to dismantle some stereotype that we have about immigration and this W-flu. So I really think that it's worth, and this should be a reciprocal responsibility, not only that Western society look at what they believe are the underdeveloped country, but it should be the same. So we are, although at the same time, we need to appreciate very much the local context and the global interconnection of the world. And anytime we are faced with the war, crisis, climate problem, any social problem, we need to be open and even very attached to a local identity and cultural identity. This is my way about multidimensional identity. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much. I learned a lot from this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Maria.
Do you want to reply? Have the title and the cover. I understand that the cover page couldn't be provided if the book is not yet published, but at least if you can send the title of all the book that has been presented, because I made the screenshot of the all the book presented, but not the title of every. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Anna Maria. There is the title and the publisher is in my slide. So if you, so in my slide, I present each handbook with the title, the publisher, so you can find.
But I probably I had also a connection problem.
But all is recorded, so you can.
Perfetto, perfetto. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, please.
Sorry, it's actually a question to follow up later, but I'm not sure. So just for our book, but I think also for others, there is like a discount that I'm very happy to share. So maybe it can be done later, or if anyone is interested, instead of purchasing it at the full price, obviously, I'm very happy to share a discount code. I don't know if that's true for others, but I will discuss it with Bruna later. Sorry. Okay. But otherwise, just email me, for example, if you're interested in this.
So the message is, if you are interested, please contact the participant, and they perhaps will offer something. Will offer something as discount. Perhaps it's true. Okay, I think that we have to finish, because now there will be a keynote in this Aula Magna. So, well, there are a lot of idea of stimuli have been offered to us, and I think that they stimulate the willing to read, to read the different book in the different languages, because, well, our force is really that we are international, and even if each context has its specificity, and is the one of the main the basic principle of our discipline, that the importance of the context, because the context are the setting in which all the things happen, but there are some common things, there are common principles, not things, there are common principles all around the world, in the global north, in the global south. Now is called the new way of called the global south and the global north. But I'm firmly convinced that of the importance of exchange, of creating bonds, creating links among us, and this is one of the possibility. There are some suggestions made to make some international way. I don't know exactly how, but we can find the way. Now there is a lot of possibility that the technology can offer us to make in contact, even if one is now in the South Africa, or in Italy, or in UK, or in Germany. So it's possible to have the contact and to be linked. And I think that we can develop more and more this link. We are very strong interpersonal relationship, and this is well, is important anyway. Those that are with us in this table, but I think that also for the new generation is important to establish this link of communication in order to have a new generation of community psychologists. Okay, thank you to everybody.
Thank you.